All right, at this stage, the principal investigator, the historical archaeologist working on studying a past human culture at a specific site or sites, now has a decision to make. Research with historical documents and non-invasive techniques have taken us as far as they can go. In order to answer our research questions, we're going to need to dig. Now we have to answer two big questions. Where and how do we dig? In order to answer both questions, we need to know what parts of an archaeological site might be most likely to have the information we need to answer our research questions and to test the hypotheses we've made about the site. How do we decide? First, we use the information we've already gotten about the site from non-invasive studies. For example, if we have areas where metal detecting has found concentrations of metal, LiDAR images that show features in certain areas of the site, or ground-penetrating radar anomalies that suggest there's something below the ground surface in some areas, all of those suggest that these may be places we want to dig. Second, however, before we even dig there, it's important to remember that a lot of different things may have been happening at an archaeological site when people lived there. Some of these things may not be detectable by our non-invasive studies. So how do we decide how different areas at a site might be related to each other? Before an archaeologist digs in specific areas, it's normally the best idea to start with subsurface testing. Subsurface testing means setting up a place to measure from, usually called a site datum, and laying out a grid, a pattern of squares, usually between 10 meters and 20 meters apart over the surface of a site. At each point on the grid, an archaeologist will normally place a shovel test, a square hole 50 centimeters wide and usually a meter, about 39 inches deep. The soil that comes from each test will be screened through a wire mesh screen that can be shaken to get rid of the soil, leaving any artifacts behind in the screen. As the tests are dug, archaeologists bag the artifacts they recover, draw a profile or a side view of the different levels of soil and any features they find, and draw a map of the places they found artifacts and what kind of artifacts they found. Once subsurface testing is done and archaeologists have an idea about where different types of artifacts at a site are coming from, the principal investigator will decide if and where block excavations are to be done. Block excavations are what most people think of when they think of archaeology. They're larger square or rectangular units, usually 2 meters by 2 meters, or roughly 6 feet by 6 feet square, that are dug in levels, the layers of soil going downwards as they're dug. As an archaeologist excavates each level, the soil is screened to recover artifacts. As each level is completed, any features such as post molds, fire pits, building foundations, or trash pits are drawn onto a map that shows their locations and relationships with other features and artifacts. The artifacts that are found from each level are bagged separately from the other levels. That's because of the law of superposition. The law of superpositions says that unless someone comes along and disturbs the soil later, the deeper you dig, the older the soil. That means, generally speaking, that artifacts from the upper layers of soil will be more recent than artifacts found in the deeper layers. During block excavations, as larger areas are opened up, archaeologists may be able to find the places where structures once stood. For example, at the Tree Lawn Plantation site, the work that's been done so far has helped archaeologists studying the site to find what appears to be a building that was used first as a kitchen in the early 1800s and then as a residence where people lived after the Civil War. Keeping good records when a dig is going on lets archaeologists learn more about what was happening in each part of the site. Finally, once the archaeologist has dug just enough to answer their research questions, and no more, the units that have been dug are filled in and recorded so other archaeologists can come back to the site later. And then some of the most important parts of the dig begin.